I never believed in coincidences. Or at least, I never gave them much thought. But sometimes life throws someone into your path in a way that feels almost scripted, like a scene from a movie you didn't know you were starring in. That's how it was the night I met her. It had been one of those long weeks at work where every day blurred into the next. Meetings, deadlines, endless cups of coffee. By Friday night, I was drained, but I couldn't stand the thought of going straight home. A buddy of mine convinced me to stop by a lounge downtown, a cozy place with dim lighting, leather couches, and a quiet atmosphere that promised relaxation more than chaos. When I walked in, the place was only half full. The hum of conversations mixed with soft jazz playing in the background. I ordered a drink, sat down at the bar, and tried to let the stress of the week melt away. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting a few seats down, completely absorbed in a book. A book. In a lounge full of people scrolling through their phones or chatting in groups, she was the only one with her head bent over actual pages. There was something captivating about her. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and she absent-mindedly tucked a strand behind her ear as her eyes schemed the lines. She wasn't dressed to stand out: jeans, a fitted blouse, nothing too extravagant, but the way she carried herself made her impossible to ignore. Confident, yet self-contained. I caught myself staring longer than I should have, and when she suddenly looked up, our eyes met. For a split second, I thought she'd frown, annoyed at being interrupted. Instead, she gave me a small smile, just enough to make my heart skip. "Good book?" I asked, nodding toward her hands. She tilted her head, a spark of amusement in her eyes. "Better than most conversations I overhear in places like this." I chuckled, sliding one seat closer. "That's a pretty strong endorsement. Mind if I test my chances against the competition?" She hesitated for a moment, then closed the book with a soft thud. "All right. You've got 5 minutes. Impress me." There was a playful challenge in her tone, and it caught me off guard. Most people I'd met at bars or lounges stuck to the usual small talk: work, hobbies, maybe a joke about the weather. But she wasn't handing me anything easy. I had to earn her attention. I leaned in slightly. 5 minutes, huh? All right. Let's see. I work too much, sleep too little, and I make a terrible omelette. But I'm a great listener, I have questionable taste in music, and I can promise I'm at least slightly more interesting than your average Friday night drunk guy. Her lips curved into a grin. Slightly more interesting is a low bar. Exactly. Which means I'm winning already. She laughed, a soft, genuine laugh that made me want to keep the conversation going forever. And just like that, 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20. We talked about books, music, travel. She told me she worked in design freelance, mostly so her schedule was unpredictable. I admitted that my job felt like a cage sometimes, structured to the point of suffocation. Time slipped by unnoticed until the bartender announced last call. She glanced at her phone, surprised. "I didn't realize it was so late," she said, slipping her book into her bag. "Guess I passed the 5-minute test?" I asked. Her eyes softened as she looked at me. "You did?" "Barely." I smiled. "Then maybe I should walk you out, just to be safe. Can't let a book lover wander the city alone at midnight." She considered it for a second before nodding. "All right. But only because you asked nicely." Outside, the night air was cooler, the streets quieter. Neon signs flickered against the dark, and the city hummed with its usual late-night rhythm. We walked side by side, our pace slow, unhurried. "So," I said, "are you always this mysterious in lounges? Reading books and intimidating strangers with 5-minute tests?" She smirked. "Only when I'm bored." And tonight, I wasn't bored. There was a subtle tension between us now, not uncomfortable, but charged. The kind you notice when you're aware of every step, every glance, every brush of an arm. We reached the corner where she said she'd call a ride. She turned to me, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. "I had a good time," she said. "Me too. So, can I see you again?" She raised an eyebrow. "Confident, aren't you?" "Hopeful," I corrected. For a long second, she studied me like she was trying to decide if I was worth another evening of her time. Then she pulled out her phone, tapped her number into mine, and handed it back. "Don't make me regret this," she said with a teasing smile. "I won't," I promised. Her car pulled up, and before getting in, she looked back at me one last time. "Good night." "Good night," I echoed, watching as she disappeared into the night. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of our encounter. The way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the way her voice carried that quiet confidence, the way she seemed to challenge me without even trying. It was rare to meet someone who stirred that kind of curiosity in me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I didn't just want to escape the monotony of my routine, I wanted something more. Something unpredictable. Her name was Claire. And I had no idea just how much she was about to change my life. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, my phone already in my hand. I drafted a dozen different messages before finally settling on something simple. "So, did I earn a second 5 minutes?" I hit send and tossed the phone aside, telling myself not to overthink it. A few minutes later, the screen lit up with her reply. "That depends. Do you make better coffee than omelets?" I grinned. She had a sharpness about her, a playful way of keeping me on my toes. "Only one way to find out," I wrote back. "Coffee tomorrow." There was a pause before her answer came through. "Fine. Tomorrow. But don't be late." The cafe we chose was a quiet spot tucked away on a side street, the kind of place only locals knew about. Wooden tables, the smell of fresh espresso, soft music humming in the background. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting by the window, sunlight spilling across her face. She looked different in daylight, softer, somehow, but no less captivating. She smiled when she saw me, and I felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement, like a teenager on his first real date. "You're on time," she said as I sat down. "Told you I wouldn't be late." The conversation picked up as easily as it had the night before. She talked about her latest project, designing a new logo for a small startup, and I told her about the chaos of office life. She teased me for being too corporate, and I teased her for being too free-spirited. But beneath the banter, there was something else growing. A connection. A spark. At one point, she leaned in, her voice dropping just enough to feel intimate. "You know, I wasn't planning to talk to anyone that night at the lounge." "Really? Then why me?" She studied me with those sharp, curious eyes. "Because you didn't just ask what I was reading. You actually cared about the answer." That caught me off guard. It was such a simple thing, but the way she said it made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell her I cared about more than just her book, but I bit my tongue. It was too soon. Instead, I just smiled. "Well, I'm glad I passed the test," I said. "For now," she teased. By the time we finished our coffee, neither of us seemed ready to leave. She suggested a walk through the park nearby, and I eagerly agreed. The afternoon stretched lazily around us, and as we wandered the tree-lined paths, the conversation grew deeper. She told me about her childhood, about moving from city to city because of her father's job. I shared stories about my reckless college days, some embarrassing enough to make her laugh out loud. At one point, she brushed against my arm, and neither of us pulled away. There was an ease between us, but also a current of something unspoken, something simmering just beneath the surface. As the sun dipped lower, we paused by the lake, the water shimmering in the golden light. She turned to me, her expression softer than before. "You know," she said quietly, "I wasn't sure about this at first. But I think I want to see where this goes." My heart raced. Me too. And in that moment, with the fading sunlight painting her hair in gold, I knew this wasn't just another passing encounter. It was the beginning of something that would pull me out of the life I thought I was stuck in. Something that would test me, challenge me, and maybe even consume me. The days that followed were different. Not because my job had suddenly become less demanding or the city less noisy, but because I knew Claire was somewhere out there, waiting on the other side of a message, a call, a plan. That thought was enough to make the ordinary feel charged with possibility. We didn't waste much time. After our coffee and walk in the park, we met again 2 days later, this time for dinner. She picked the restaurant, a small Italian place hidden in a quiet street I never knew existed. Candlelit tables, the faint sound of violins, and the smell of fresh basil drifting through the air. "You like pasta, right?" she asked as we sat down. "I mean, who doesn't like pasta? Some people don't trust carbs," she teased. "Those people can't be trusted," I shot back. She laughed, and just like before, conversation flowed effortlessly. With her, silence wasn't awkward, it was comfortable. Yet the pauses between our words seemed heavy with something else, like we were both aware of a thread tugging us closer, even when we weren't speaking. At one point, she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, studying me. "You know what your problem is?" "Only one." I smirked. "You underestimate yourself. You downplay everything. Your job, your talents, even your sense of humor. It's like you're afraid to admit you might actually be good." Her words caught me off guard. Nobody had ever said that to me so directly. And here I thought I was charming you with humility. "You don't need humility," she said softly. "You just need to stop hiding." Her gaze held mine, steady and unflinching, and I felt a strange mix of being seen and exposed. For a moment, the rest of the restaurant faded, and it was just her eyes locking me in place. I cleared my throat, searching for an escape. "So what about you? What's your problem?" She smiled knowingly, swirling her glass of wine. "I run before people get too close. It's easier that way." The honesty in her voice surprised me. "And yet here you are, having dinner with me." "Yes," she admitted, her smile turning faintly vulnerable. "Here I am." After dinner, we walked along the streetlights, the city alive around us. I offered to call her a ride, but she shook her head. "Let's walk a little longer," she said. We ended up near a bookstore that was still open late. She insisted we go in, and I found myself trailing her through aisles stacked with stories. She picked up a copy of something and handed it to me. Read this one, she said. Then tell me if you still think my taste in books is pretentious. Deal, I said, sliding it under my arm. As we stepped outside, I realized we were standing closer than we had ever been. The night air was cooler, and she pulled her jacket tighter. Without thinking, I offered my arm. She hesitated, then looped hers through mine. It felt natural. Dangerous, maybe, but natural. By the time we reached the corner where we'd part, neither of us wanted to let go. She lingered, her hand brushing against mine. The air between us thickened with silence, with the weight of something unsaid. I should go, she whispered. Yeah, I replied, though my body resisted the idea. But before stepping away, she leaned in, not quite a kiss, but close enough that I felt her breath against my cheek, her voice barely audible. Don't be late next time, she said, then walked away, leaving me standing there with my pulse hammering in my chest. The following week blurred into a rhythm of workdays and stolen moments. We met for coffee, for late-night drinks, for walks through parts of the city I hadn't explored in years. Every time, the pull between us grew stronger. One evening, she invited me to her apartment. It was a loft, tastefully minimal but warm, plants by the window, shelves stacked with books, sketches pinned to a corkboard. Sorry for the mess, she said, though it was anything but messy. I looked around, impressed. If this is your idea of messy, I should never let you near my place. She smirked, pouring us glasses of wine. Maybe someday. We settled onto her couch, the city lights glowing faintly through the window. She showed me some of her sketches, design drafts, logo concepts, even doodles she'd made when bored. You're talented, I said, meaning it. She shrugged. It pays the bills. No, I insisted, leaning closer. You're more than talented. I stopped, realizing I was dangerously close to confessing more than I should. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching. Finish the sentence. I swallowed. You're captivating. Her breath caught just slightly, and for a long moment, we simply looked at each other. The tension was unmistakable now, no longer something hovering in the background. She set her glass down, her fingers brushing against mine. You know what you're doing, right? What am I doing? I asked, my voice lower than usual. You're making it very hard for me to keep my usual rules. What rules? The ones where I don't let people in too far. I reached out, gently taking her hand. Then maybe it's time to break them. She held my gaze for what felt like forever, then leaned back with a half smile. Careful. You might get more than you bargained for. We didn't kiss that night. But the air between us burned with restraint, with the kind of anticipation that almost feels sharper than the act itself. Our meetings became more frequent after that. Each time, the intimacy edged closer, the boundaries thinner. A hand on the small of her back, her fingers lingering on my wrist, a laugh followed by a look that lasted too long. One night, after a late dinner, we walked back toward her building. Rain had just passed, leaving the street slick and shining under the lamp posts. She slipped on the pavement, and I caught her instinctively, pulling her against me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her hands rested on my chest, and she looked up at me with an expression that made my breath catch. This is dangerous, she whispered. Then why does it feel so right? I asked. Her lips parted, and I thought this would finally be it, the moment we crossed the line. But instead, she pulled back, her eyes conflicted. Not yet, she said softly. Frustration tugged at me, but I respected it. There was something deliberate about the way she paced things, like she was testing both of us. Okay, I said. Not yet. She smiled faintly, squeezing my hand before heading inside. I stood there in the rain, my clothes damp, my body buzzing with unspent energy, and I realized something: she wasn't just another woman in my life. She was the beginning of a story I couldn't predict, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for how deeply it would take me. But by the end of that week, not yet turned into almost. We were at her apartment again, sitting on the couch, the glow of a movie forgotten in the background. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. My arm slipped around her without thought, pulling her closer. She shifted slightly, her hand brushing against mine, then resting on my thigh. I felt her pulse quicken, or maybe it was mine. Slowly, she tilted her head up, her lips inches from mine. This time, she whispered, "Don't stop." And then she kissed me. It wasn't rushed or careless. It was deliberate, controlled, yet charged with all the tension we had been holding back. Her lips moved against mine with a mixture of restraint and hunger, and I felt every nerve in my body ignite. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine, her eyes half-lidded. "Now you see why I wait," she murmured. "Because when I finally let go, it's never small." I couldn't speak. I just kissed her again, deeper this time, letting the weeks of anticipation spill out in one long, slow release. The night didn't go further than that, not yet. But I knew it would. And when it did, nothing about my life would be the same again. After that first kiss, there was no going back. The next few days felt different, charged, like the world had shifted just slightly off its axis. Every text, every call with Claire carried an undercurrent of something we both knew was waiting. We had tasted what it felt like to close the distance, and the pull was stronger than ever. One night, after a particularly grueling day at work, she messaged me. "Come over. I've got wine. And maybe, other things." My pulse jumped the second I read it. I barely hesitated before typing back, "On my way." Her apartment was warm, filled with the soft glow of lamps instead of the harsh overhead light. A record played on her turntable, something slow and velvety. She greeted me at the door with a smile that was equal parts playful and dangerous. "You look like you've had a long day," she said, handing me a glass of red wine. "You have no idea," I muttered, taking a sip. "Well, lucky for you," she continued, her eyes glittering, "I happen to be very good at distractions." She settled onto the couch, tucking one leg under her, patting the seat beside her. When I sat down, she leaned into me immediately, her head resting lightly against my shoulder. It was simple, almost innocent. But the warmth of her body against mine, the smell of her hair, the way her hand brushed against my arm, it was enough to set my nerves on fire. We talked for a while, though the words began to matter less. Her laughter, the way she looked at me from under her lashes, the way her fingers traced idle patterns on my sleeve, all of it drowned out the actual conversation. At one point, she reached for her glass, her arm brushing across my chest, and when she set it down, she didn't pull back. Her face was close, her lips slightly parted. I didn't wait. I kissed her, harder this time, the kind of kiss that comes after weeks of restraint. She kissed me back with equal force, her hand sliding to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. The taste of wine lingered on her lips, the heat of her breath mixing with mine. When we finally broke apart, She was smiling, her eyes dark with something unmistakable. "I told you," she whispered, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw, "when I let go, it's never small." The night unfolded slowly, almost deliberately. She seemed to savor every second, as if we were writing a story line by line instead of rushing to the final page. We shifted closer on the couch, our bodies pressed together now. My hand slid along her waist, feeling the curve of her through the thin fabric of her blouse. She shivered slightly, but didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into me, her lips finding mine again and again, each kiss deeper than the last. "Tell me," she murmured between breaths, "what do you want right now?" The question caught me off guard, but the answer came easily. "You." Her smile widened, satisfied. "Good. Because that's exactly what I want too." We didn't rush to the bedroom. For a long while, we stayed on the couch, exploring each other in the half-light. Her fingers tangled in my hair, my hands tracing the line of her back. There was a rawness to it, a hunger, but also a tenderness that surprised me. At one point, she pulled back just enough to study me. "You're different," she said softly. "Different how?" "Most men rush. They want everything at once. But you're patient. You make me feel like I'm allowed to take my time." I kissed her forehead gently. "That's because I'm not here for just tonight." Her expression shifted, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. She didn't reply, but the way she kissed me then was answer enough. Eventually, we did move to the bedroom. The details don't need to be explicit to explain the weight of that night. It wasn't just physical, it was a release, a surrender, a moment where two people drop every guard they built. She was everything I'd imagined and more, fierce and soft, playful and demanding, careful yet wild. Every touch felt amplified, every glance electric. When it was over, we didn't pull apart. She lay against me, her head on my chest, her breathing slowing back to normal. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was full, heavy with the acknowledgement that something had changed. "This is where it gets complicated," she said quietly after a long time. "Complicated how?" She hesitated. "I told you I run before people get too close. That's been my rule for a long time. And now I'm lying here, realizing I don't want to run. Not yet. But that scares me." I stroked her hair gently, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not asking you to change overnight. Just, don't run from me. Not unless you really have to." She tilted her head up, her eyes searching mine. For a moment, I thought she'd argue. Instead, she kissed me softly, a whisper of a promise. "Okay," she said. "Not yet." The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm we both pretended wasn't as serious as it was. We spent nights together, sometimes out in the city, sometimes tangled up in her sheets, sometimes just lying side by side, talking until dawn. I learned her habits, the way she hummed when she was focused on a sketch, the way she hated when her coffee went cold, the way she bit her lip when she was lost in thought. She learned mine, that I worked too late, that I cracked my knuckles when I was nervous, that I had an embarrassing weakness for old action movies. On the surface, it felt casual, like two people enjoying each other's company. But underneath, there was a weight to it, something growing that neither of us wanted to name just yet. One night, as we lay in her bed, she turned to me suddenly. "You're dangerous," she said. I frowned. "Dangerous how?" "Because you make me forget my rules. And when I forget my rules, I fall too hard." I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then maybe the rules were never meant to last. Her eyes lingered on mine, and for the first time, she didn't try to argue. She just kissed me, slow and deliberate, as if to seal the thought in place. But even as our connection deepened, I could sense the shadow of her hesitation. There were moments brief, fleeting when her eyes clouded, when she pulled away slightly, when she seemed to retreat into herself. I didn't push. Not yet. But I knew those shadows meant something, and sooner or later, I'd have to face them. For now, though, I let myself stay in the warmth of her presence. Because whatever complications waited, I couldn't deny it anymore. I was already falling. And by the look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching, she was too. For a while, life with Claire felt like stepping into another world. The grind of work still existed, deadlines still loomed, but when I was with her, none of it mattered. Nights stretched long and heavy with laughter, stolen touches, and whispered confessions. She filled a space in me I hadn't realized was hollow. But nothing that burns this brightly stays untouched for long. It started with something small. We were at a rooftop bar one evening, the city lights sprawling beneath us. Claire looked stunning, dark dress, hair falling loose around her shoulders, her eyes glowing in the candlelight. We had already shared 2 cocktails, and the mood was light. That's when a man approached our table. He was tall, sharp-suited, the kind of confidence that oozed with practiced charm. "Claire?" he asked, smiling like he already knew the answer. She looked up, surprised. "Daniel? Wow. It's been forever." They exchanged a quick hug, and immediately I felt my chest tighten. She introduced me casually, "This is Daniel, an old friend from a design project years ago." Friend felt too vague, too easy. Daniel lingered at the edge of our table, engaging her in conversation, asking about her work, teasing her about memories I wasn't part of. And she laughed. Not the soft, reserved laugh I'd learned to draw out of her, but a freer, more familiar sound. I tried to stay composed, sipping my drink, nodding when included. But inside, something ugly stirred. Eventually, Daniel excused himself, promising to catch up again sometime. When he was gone, I tried to sound casual. "Old friend, huh?" Claire caught the tone immediately. Her smile faded. "Yes. Just a friend. Relax." "I am relaxed," I lied. She leaned back, crossing her arms. "You're jealous." I hesitated, then exhaled. "Maybe a little." He looked at you like. "Like what?" "Like he used to be more than just a friend." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Even if he was, it doesn't matter. I'm here with you." I wanted to accept that. I wanted to trust it completely. But the shadow of doubt clung to me, stubborn as smoke. Later that night, back at her apartment, the tension lingered. She poured wine, moving around the kitchen with deliberate calm. "You know," she said finally, handing me a glass, "I told you from the start I run when people get too close. Want to know why?" I nodded. "Because when I let someone in, I need them to trust me. Completely. Without second guessing, without suspicion. If you can't do that, this won't work." Her words hit hard. I set the glass down, stepping closer. "I do trust you. It just scares me how much I want you. How much I don't want to lose this." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the tension cracked. She touched my face gently, her thumb brushing along my cheek. Then stop worrying about what's behind me. Start looking at what's right in front of you. And when she kissed me, the fight dissolved into something hotter, more desperate. That night, our passion had a different edge. It wasn't the slow burn of before, it was fire, fueled by tension, jealousy, fear, and the need to claim what was ours. Her lips were urgent, her hands fierce, her body pressing against mine like she was proving something. I matched her intensity, pulling her closer, losing myself in her heat. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Every kiss, every gasp, every touch carried the words we couldn't form aloud: "You're mine. Don't forget it." When it was over, we lay tangled together, our bodies damp, our breaths uneven. Claire traced patterns on my chest, her voice softer now. "Jealousy's dangerous," she murmured. "I know. But maybe," she added with a faint smile, "a little bit of it means you care." The days that followed were a blur of highs and lows. Some nights we laughed until sunrise, drunk on each other's company. Other nights, silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of things unsaid. She had a way of pulling me in and pushing me away all at once. One moment, she'd open herself completely, sharing stories from her childhood, dreams she'd never spoken aloud. The next, she'd shut down, retreating behind a wall I couldn't see through. I tried to be patient, but patience has limits. One evening, after a long day, I found her sketching at her desk. Papers scattered, pencil smudges on her fingers. She didn't notice me at first, so absorbed in her work. "You look beautiful when you're focused," I said softly. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "You always say the right things." I walked over, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Only when I mean them." But instead of leaning into me, she set her pencil down and sighed. "Sometimes I think this is moving too fast." The words struck like ice. "Too fast?" She stood, pacing slightly. "Yes. We've known each other, what, a couple months? And already, it feels like," she trailed off. "Like what?" I pressed. "Like I'm losing control." Her honesty stung. I wanted to argue, to convince her that what we had was worth holding onto, but the fear in her eyes stopped me. So I just said quietly, "Maybe losing control isn't always a bad thing." She didn't answer. Instead, she crossed the room and kissed me, hard and sudden, as if to silence the conversation. That became our pattern: passion and hesitation, closeness and distance. The intensity between us never dimmed, but neither did the shadows. One night, after another argument that dissolved into fire, Claire curled against me in bed, her voice barely audible. "You should know. I'm not easy to love." I kissed her hair, holding her tighter. "Good thing I don't want easy." It was messy, it was complicated, it was fragile. But I couldn't stop. Because every time I looked at her, every time I touched her, every time she let her guard down for even a second, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. I was already in too deep. And whether she admitted it or not, so was she. The breaking point came on a Thursday. It had been a brutal week at work, and all I wanted was the comfort of Claire's voice, her touch, her presence that had become my only refuge. But when I got to her apartment, she wasn't the same Claire I knew. She was distant, restless, pacing the living room like a storm trapped in four walls. "What's wrong?" I asked, closing the door behind me. She didn't answer right away. Instead, She poured herself a drink, downed it too fast, then finally turned toward me. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice was low. "Why are you still here?" The question hit harder than I expected. "What do you mean? You should have run by now." "That's what people do. They get close, they see the cracks, and then they leave." "But you," she broke off, shaking her head. I stepped closer, trying to catch her gaze. "I'm not people. I'm me. And I'm here because I want to be." She laughed bitterly, pacing again. "You don't get it? You don't know how dark it gets when I fall. I ruin things. I ruin people." I reached out, catching her wrist gently. "Claire. Stop. You don't scare me." Her eyes flashed with frustration, and for a moment, I thought she might actually pull away for good. But then, suddenly, she collapsed into my arms, her body trembling, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to let someone love me without destroying it," she whispered. I held her tightly, my heart pounding. "Then let me be the one thing you don't destroy." That night, our passion carried a different weight. It wasn't just fire, it was desperation, surrender, a need to prove that we could survive the chaos inside her. Every kiss was fierce, every touch urgent, every breath stolen. She clung to me like I was both her anchor and her undoing, and I gave her everything I had. At one point, as I traced her face with my hands, she whispered, "Don't promise me forever. Just promise me tonight." But I couldn't help myself. "No, I promise you more than that." Her eyes filled with something raw: fear, longing, hope, and then she kissed me like she was trying to believe it. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, and for the first time in weeks, Claire looked peaceful. She lay with her head on my chest, her hand resting lightly on my stomach, her breathing slow. I didn't want to move. Didn't want to break the spell. But eventually, she stirred, blinking awake. When she saw me watching her, she smiled softly. "What?" she asked. "Just, trying to remember this moment forever." She rolled her eyes playfully, but her cheeks flushed. "You're impossible." "Maybe," I said, kissing her forehead. "But you're stuck with me." Things weren't perfect after that. We still fought, still stumbled, still wrestled with the shadows she carried and the fears I couldn't always silence. But something shifted. Claire stopped pulling away as often. She began letting me in, showing me not just her fire, but her fragility. And I learned to stop doubting, to stop letting jealousy eat at me. One evening, weeks later, we sat on her balcony overlooking the city. She leaned against me, a blanket wrapped around our shoulders. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think love was supposed to be easy. That if it wasn't effortless, it wasn't real. But maybe it's the fight that makes it real." I squeezed her hand. "Then I'll fight for this. For us. Every time." She turned her head, her eyes glistening in the city lights. "And maybe I'll stop running." I smiled, kissing her softly. "That's all I ask." That night, we didn't need words. The closeness between us spoke louder than anything we could have said. It wasn't just passion anymore, it was trust, fragile but real, built through fire and fear and the choice to stay. For the first time, I knew this wasn't just a fleeting chapter. This was the beginning of something lasting. Something worth every risk. Looking back, I think of the night I first saw her in that lounge, head bent over a book, untouchable and mysterious. I had no idea then what she would become, how she would unravel me, challenge me, make me jealous, make me patient, make me whole. Claire wasn't easy. She wasn't safe. But she was real. And as I held her close, her laughter soft against my neck, I realized that was all I had ever wanted. Not easy. Not perfect. Just real.